when you have a VPC on AWS, by default, that VPC, if you create a VPC on AWS, by default, that VPC is called a private network. And that is why, if you look at the definition of a VPC, it says what? Virtual private cloud. It's private. What does private mean? It's not publicly accessible. So when we talk about private VPC, it means that once you separate your resources away from AWS, away from other AWS resources, which is by default you must do. Even if you don't do it, AWS will do it for you. So what that simply means is that all these other services on AWS cloud cannot automatically communicate with each other. And even if you have on-prem data center, these two cannot also communicate to each other, because what you have here is a private network that nobody can connect to. All these resources here, they can communicate with each other. They can communicate with each other, but guess what? They cannot communicate outside of this VPC, outside of this network. That's why it's called a private network. So you might have clients everywhere. Maybe you have some clients that are not your employee, or they are not part of your organization, and you might have your employee and your administrators too, and you might also have your data centers. All of these, you might want to be able to connect them to the resources you have in the cloud, or you might want them to be able to connect to the resources that you have in the cloud. So one way for you to be able to make sure that your users, customers, or your data center are able to connect to this VPC is by allowing is by connecting this network, this VPC, to the general internet, to the bigger network which is on the internet. And the only way for you to do that is to AWS provide you a service that can make you allow internet or outside connection to this VPC. And that service is called the Internet Gateway, Amazon Internet Gateway. And the way Amazon Internet Gateway works is that you have to create an IGW, or Internet Gateway, and you have to attach it to your VPC like this. You have to attach it to your VPC. So now that we have an internet gateway attached to our VPC, so anybody from the internet now that wants to communicate to our private VPC can now do so through the internet gateway. So what is an internet gateway? An internet gateway is just one of the VPC components that allow communication between your VPC and the internet. Without the internet gateway, no resources here can communicate to the internet by default. There are other options that you can use later for security best practice. It's not even good to use the internet gateway, but just like the basic, the first thing that if you want to be able to connect to the internet, is through the internet gateway. But we're going to see some better option later that you can use to connect to the internet without going through the internet gateway. So another thing about the internet gateway is that you can think of it as the gates to your house that allow people from the community, from the city, state, or country to come into your house. If you don't have the gates there, maybe you just have fence around the house, they won't be able to come in. Nowhere, the people cannot jump fence. It's not rational to jump through the fence. But let's say you don't have gates at all. You just have a fence that is round the house. Then that means like a private place. Nobody can come in, nobody can go out. So the only way people can come in or can go out is if you have a gate. So you can see that internet gateway as like a gate for that allows people on the community or from the community, state or country to come in into your house. And the internet gateway is just a passage for the people on the internet to be able to communicate to your private network.